Bam! What is going on, folks? MC is in the house. My name is Justin Garcia, also known as Master Chim, and welcome to the Warrior Stream. I am here every Wednesday at noon Eastern Standard Time, talking about a given topic, sharing my opinion, maybe getting some feedback from the viewers, and usually having a good time while doing it. A little housekeeping before we start. If you guys have not yet signed up to my email list, please go to masterchim.com and do that. There's also a whole bunch of stuff that I offer in terms of content and value and processes and talks and PDFs that I've made that are completely free. And a lot of those links will be in the description, depending on what platform you're watching. So be sure to do that. If you are watching on a given platform, make sure you are following me. There are a significant number of people who watch the videos, whether it's on one of my Facebook pages or on YouTube, and don't follow the actual channel. So please do that. And let's get it popping. See who's here. Jesse, what's going on? Aaron, good to see you. Casetas, what's up, brother, man? Good to see you as well. We got a pretty good topic in store today. And if you are watching, just do me a favor and comment so I can give you a shout also. We're going to talk today about your loser friends, right? And, I have, I'd say over the years, shared a lot of popular, unpopular opinions. So what do I mean by that? Big Fred, my man. What do I mean by popular, unpopular opinions? It means I've sort of carved a little niche for myself in the people that I connect with. Where they count on me for saying the things that most people don't say, and or the things that they may not want to hear, but because it's coming from me, they're willing to consider it anyway. And I think today's topic is true to form where that's concerned, because we're going to talk about some loser stuff that, first and foremost, I don't want you to be associated with, but it sort of begs the question, and we'll see this as we're going down. It's sort of like, are you doing these things too, right? And it sort of reflected that in how I promoted this talk today. I put a thing. Well, obviously the topic is, your loser friends, but then the thumbnail for the talk is, am I a loser too? Because ultimately that's the thing that I want you to prioritize, making sure you're not putting out these vibes, because the vibes that you're putting out usually attract the people that resonate the most with them. So you're putting out some loser shit, you are going to be catching losers the rest of your life, right? And that's something that, in my experience, you want to avoid. Now, before I get into it, I actually prepared a list for today of characteristics to avoid when sort of designing your tribe, your inner circle. Worth, I guess, a couple of just precursors to that. Number one, when you know what you're doing, when you have a mission, and I'm saying number one, it's not from the list number one, but firstly, I'll say that. Firstly, it's important to understand that if you don't have any direction in life, if you don't have a goal, if you don't have a target to sort of aim the trajectory of your efforts, you really are handicapping yourself when it comes to figuring out what is good and what is bad. Because if we say something is good or bad, there has to be some context that sort of populates those definitions and our relationship with them. If I'm saying I want to be a vegan, I don't know why, but let's just say I want to be a vegan, and somebody offers me a steak. If I'm saying I want to be a vegan, somebody offers me a steak, I could say, no, that is bad. Now, it doesn't mean steak is necessarily bad. It could mean it's just bad in reference to the mission that I'm trying to stay on. So that I think is a pretty helpful filter when looking at these things, because whenever I talk to people about their friends, they're always in this battle, or they reduce themselves to this false dichotomy of, I could either be good and productive, or I could be loyal and a stand-up guy. And they're not mutually exclusive. And that's the sort of distinction that I want to start with. What's up, Big Corey? Good to see you, brother. So when we are designing these connections and the filters that we lay over them, is this a good connection, a bad connection? The context has to be mission-based. In the absence of any mission, it then will sort of be defined by whatever your morality is. If you are somebody who is more easygoing, maybe a little bit more socially liberal, when you enter certain circumstances, you might not be triggered or offended or repelled, repulsed in any way, where somebody who's a little bit more conservative minded socially might sort of go a different direction. And that might not be based on any one individual mission that they have in terms of what they're aspiring to develop, but it might just be the sort of default who they are and how they personally overlap or offset with a given set of circumstances. So I think it's important that each of us individually decide what, or decide is ultimately what it'll be, but at least process and begin to understand, well, what are the goals we're trying to sort of achieve? What is the direction we're moving? We have to do a lot of climbing. Well, where are we setting the ladder to sort of represent where we're ultimately trying to develop to? That adds the context for a lot of these good or bad, yes or no decisions that we'll have to make moving forward as we do, right? So all that being said, let's get into this list. So I have the list, and again, these are 5 things, 5 characteristics that I really, really want you guys to understand on a personal level, because I'm going to, and I don't think this is like a tough sell that I'm going to do today, but each one of these characteristics, when represented in the people that you are being influenced by, and whether or not you acknowledge it, just being exposed to somebody either repetitively or for a duration of time, they are going to have an influence. There's always going to be, to some degree, a regression to the mean when you are surrounding yourself with some sort of identity or energy repetitively or for a duration, like I mentioned before. So it's important to understand that each one of these characteristics that I'm going to go over, each one of these 5 things, you want to sort of look at your circle around you and ask yourself, do they represent any of these 5? Do they have any of these 5? Do they have all the 5? Do they have none of them? Are you the one that has one or multiple of this 5? And none of your list has it also, because, you might find out after doing this sort of, introspective, process, I'm the one holding people back by doing this, by thinking this way, by acting this way. And that might be the sort of impetus for you making change that's going to have a positive outcome, right? So all that, let's get into the list. So number 1, you don't want to be around people who are pessimistic or chronically negative. Pessimistic or chronically negative. You got to understand, so much of life is built on energy and enthusiasm. And when you are surrounding, yourself with people who are just perennially negative, the glass is half empty type of people, there is a cost. There is an energy cost for that. And you are going to lose some of your enthusiasm and energy for no other reason than the way that the individuals you are connected to are conducting themselves. Meaning, what you're enthusiastic about could be the greatest thing for you in your life, but because this person is perennially negative, your insight or your connection to that thing is going to be reduced, because some of your energy is going to be taken up by that void of enthusiasm that pessimists tend to represent. So if you're an individual who, looking at your life, you're somebody who you don't know if I should do something, if I shouldn't do something, or maybe you're a little hesitant, maybe you're a little doubtful, well, surround yourself with people who are pessimistic, and they'll always make you shoot as low as they can convince you to shoot. There are so many people. I remember, in jiu-jitsu, there are 5 belts. Brazilian jiu-jitsu, there are 5 belts. I opened my school when I was a blue belt. This is a second belt. It's not a very common thing to do, certainly not 20-something years ago when I did. And when I looked at the circumstances surrounding my life at that point, beginning my school made the most sense. There were plenty of people who were telling me, I don't think it's a good idea. You should just go and join a different school. And you're like, for no reason other than their own inability to be enthusiastic or positive or just optimistic about anything. They were telling me to not do something that ultimately I did. And it was one of the greatest decisions I ever made in my life. So when you surround yourself with people like that, they're going to affect you in a way that you might not even be tracking. They're going to sabotage your enthusiasm for, some endeavor that you're exposing yourself to, and they're sabotaging your ability to do that for nothing that is a part of the thing you are trying at all, but rather they're going to just shit on every idea you have, because that's what they do, right? That's what they do. So if you're around people that are pessimistic or chronically negative, those people, they got to go. Now they got to change, sure, but they got to change for them. So that's one of the things that we do incorrectly, right? We sort of just figure out, oh, this guy needs to make a change. Once he makes this change, he'll be good to go. But we sort of confuse ourselves into thinking that it's our job to make that change for them. And I would argue, and again, this is from sheer experience, not from any, well, obviously, I wouldn't look to change people that don't want to change. It's like, no, I wouldn't look to do that now, because I've tried to do it, with absolutely nothing but a failing track record in the past. So I would just share that little bit of insight and experience with you. It's like, I've tried helping people that don't want to be helped. It doesn't work. And who's one of the most difficult types to help? People who are chronically negative and pessimistic, right? So number 2 of the characteristics, right? We're going over 5. Number 1, we had pessimistic, chronic negativity. Number 2, these are the 5 characteristics that you want to avoid in the people you're surrounding yourself with. Number 2 is lack of ambition or drive. Lack of ambition or drive. Now, this is not to be confused with somebody who's just like just a low energy type of personality. You can have a lot of seemingly low energy, introverted sort of people that do nothing but crush shit in their life, because they're still moving forward, even though just their temperament, just looks low energy relative to yours, maybe. What I'm talking about are people who are almost not only lacking the ambition, but they have no clear understanding of what it is they want to do, nor do they think that understanding is something they should try to acquire. What are you going to do with your life? I don't know. Well, what's the plan? I don't know. Well, don't you want to figure that out? I don't know. There's a point where if you want to grow as an individual, you are going to rely on your tribe. Whether you believe that, acknowledge that or not, or even want that or not, that's just the fucking truth of it. If you think you're going to achieve the highest levels of your goals and aspirations completely alone, you're wrong. I mean, there's no simpler way to put it. So that being said, when we look at the second type of attribute that you want to avoid, this lack of ambition and lack of drive, these are people that just won't go there with you. They won't be able to fill in the gaps when you're sort of doubting yourself, when you're, finding it more difficult than maybe you anticipated at some leg of the race. You don't want to be able to sort of, or I should say, you do want to be able to look to your side and have somebody give you that push that you need. But if you're surrounded by people, or at least one individual who is the opposite of that, then what those people are they're going to be, instead of catalysts for growth and achievement, they're going to be catalysts for those sad stories where people paint themselves as victims, or they limit themselves because of these beliefs that really aren't based in reality, but just based in a, like, why bother sort of mindset and philosophy, right? So number 3, okay, this is a good one. And this is one, I could have put this first. Maybe I should have. But the third characteristic that you want to avoid in the people you surround yourself with are those with toxic behaviors and habits. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about people that want to get over on others, want to take advantage, want to bait and switch in business, want to rob people of their resources. Like, I don't know about you guys, but multiple times a day, I either get messages on one of my social media platforms or emails from somebody who's either pretending to be, a social media platform support center, or they're pretending to be some official, government body. And like, you're going to lose everything if you don't click this link. You're like, There are people who do nothing in their lives but destroy the energy of other people. And the people who have those toxic lifestyles and toxic outlooks, you're a fool if you think that is not in any way going to rub off on you, right? So I grew up with a lot of people. Let me say this properly, who had ambiguous relationships with the law. Let's put it that way. And it's important to know that a lot of those people that I knew were solid people, were people you could rely on, who they were people who followed a code that you could respect because you knew they were going to be themselves in any given situation. They might not have had the same preferences and outlooks that you did, but who they are was who they claimed to be and who they conducted themselves as. That being said, as I got older, I realized some of these alliances that I had would have become toxic had I continued to maintain them as I moved in different directions, especially when I started developing a professional life and I had to start thinking about business and giving value to the market and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a point where if you're surrounding yourself with the guy that just wants to get high all day, the guy that defines his success in life by how many women he slept with, or the guy who swears that this deal is so good nobody will be able to say no to it, and they won't be able to find us when they find out it's a scam. Like, there are people who wake up every day finding new ways to fuck people over. And if you're somebody who attributes, or I should say who connects and associates with those types of individuals, you deserve every consequence they do, right? I'm giving you permission to get rid of people who are toxic. There is no loyalty in that, right? So the idea of loyalty, and I've spoken about this before, loyalty is an investment, not a debt. The problem that people face is when they are inherently loyal. And when they're inherently loyal, when you have somebody who's a loyal individual, a loyal person, man or a woman, what that means, and the distinction between the two, is the loyal person can't have somebody do something for him and not want to reciprocate. So to them, any investment in them, he puts a debt on himself to reciprocate and repay. But the thing is, if you have people who have invested in you, but they are toxic, I give you permission to move away from them, right? When somebody who is toxic does a favor for you, you got to understand, if you didn't agree to pay that back, it is not a debt, and you cannot allow some sort of compulsion that you have as a loyal individual. And I think that's a very noble attribute to have. I would consider myself to be somebody who has it, but you can't let that get in the way of you manifesting the reality that you were sort of designed and born to do. So I give you permission to get rid of those toxic people, even if you feel that staying connected to them is somehow falling under the guise of loyalty. It isn't, because there's a point where if there is a point of diminishing returns, there's no more return on the investment of these individuals. What they are is a loss, right? And there's somebody who's just going to bleed you of your energy and resources, probably the most significant of which is time, right? Don't waste time on toxic people. Number 4, the constant perennial critics. Now, when somebody who's connected to you wants to do nothing but criticize everything you do, wants to offer no support for anything you're endeavoring to do, understand that these people have a problem that resides completely in them, but is now spilling over into you. So what do I mean by that? The reason people don't show support to the people they're connected to is because of a feeling of inadequacy. And it might be something as trivial as, well, if he does that, then he won't be my friend anymore, so I'm going to tell him not to do it. Or it might be, I'm so risk averse that I'm going to put that on my friend because he would be stupid to take that risk that I wouldn't take. And somehow, because these people have their own deficiencies in their relationship with themselves, that spills over into what amounts to just a lack of support and the constant criticism that might go along with it. When you are with your people, understand the basis of a mutual alliance, right? A symbiotic, synergistic alliance is that the two parties, the two allies, invest and each one gets back more than it cost them. Well, what's that to say about somebody who does nothing but criticize you and refuses to support you when you need it? There is no synergy there. And somebody who sort of defines themselves as that archetype in their relationship with you, they got to go, right? They got to go. So far, that was the first four. We had number one, people who are chronically pessimistic and negative. Number two, people who have a lack of ambition and drive. Number three, toxic people, people with toxic behaviors and habits. Number four, people who we just went over, people who are constantly criticizing you and never supporting you. And number five on the list, people who are either resistant or just completely averse to growth and change. Years ago, I made a program called Mind Killers, where I talked about biases that I observed in the people that I've dealt with throughout my life. And one of them I coined the vacuum cleaner. Now, the vacuum cleaner, what he does is life is too overwhelming for him. And it might be too overwhelming because he's intimidated or he's a control freak. So just takes life and reduces it to a level where he can control. But either way, they create a box and their reality exists in this box. And they're the vacuum cleaner because so long as they keep that box consistent with their worldview, they act like their worldview is universal. Right. So there is no pressure for them to have to change. And that's what it comes down to. People who are resistant or scaled up averse to change are people who are not going to ever support, encourage, or understand you wanting to grow or change. These are people who just don't understand the basic premise of the challenges that you are facing on a daily basis. Their reaction is, why would you want to do that? Like, a very common application of this concept is, those of you that are entrepreneurs that have businesses, at some point in your life, maybe your parents, grandparents, elders, whatever, told you, why don't you just get a good job? Why don't you just get a good job? Get a good union job. You'll be there 20 years, 30 years, then you'll have a pension. And it's a worldview that was born from a time that is different from now. I would argue even back then, like, that shouldn't have been what you had done, but I certainly would have been more of a minority in saying it. But right now, if you are somebody who does not have any entrepreneurial ambition, like, number one, I don't know why you're listening to me, because I think, you're being fucking cowardly to some extent. There are too many opportunities. Now, mind you, let me fucking put a little context to that. Like, it doesn't mean you have to quit your job, but is your job all you're supposed to do in terms of adding value to the world and receiving a compensation for that value? It's like, holy fuck, man. Like do something on the side, like rehabilitate furniture. My wife's obsessed with those YouTube videos where people rehabilitate furniture, and she does, by the way. But it's like, do something, just be more, create more. You wind up helping more people. You wind up generating more resources as a result. If you're a man who people rely on, to be their protector and provider, this is yet another way and means that you can do that more effectively. But if you're surrounded by people who are resistant to change and growth, these are the people that you talk about, them quitting their job and they stop looking at you. They start looking at the floor and there's all these NLP reasons why their brain starts sending their eyes in all these different directions. But what it comes down to, they don't want to face the reality that they're sort of labeling you as in that moment. It's like, oh man, I hate my job. And then I'm over here and I'm saying, well, you should quit your job. And they're like, oh man, but I don't know if and they're not looking at me anymore. All of a sudden the big bad monster showed up, and it wasn't me. It was this idea of what life would look like if they had to quit their job. And that's just too overwhelming. So they lower their vision as a result. And getting on something of a tangent here, but the idea of it is, if you are surrounded by people who don't want to grow, you will not grow either, or you will grow at such a reduced, retarded pace than what you would be able to do if you're surrounded by people who are supportive as a result. So again, let's go over the list. Number one, get rid of people who are pessimistic and chronically negative. Number two, get rid of people who have a lack of ambition or drive. And I'm saying get rid of, maybe it's just set the criteria for how they're going to be connected to you. If they can't keep up, that's on them, right? Number three, toxic behaviors. People who want to get high, who want to party, who want to destroy shit, who can only feel better by fighting or by eating or by taking advantage of people. Like they need a cathartic ritual from just the normal friction of life. You know, somebody cuts them off in traffic and it ruins their day. It's like, how fucking fragile are you that your day could be ruined by somebody cutting you off? Those are the people you have to get rid of. They have toxic formulas that they apply to their lives in normal circumstances. Number four, people who are constantly critical of you and refuse to support you. This is a them thing. They have a hole, a ditch in who they are, and an extreme deficiency in their own self-alliance. That ain't got shit to do with you, and you shouldn't be the whipping post for them working on their own shit with them. Those people who don't want to be there for you, what the hell are you there for them for? Every single alliance should be synergistic. There should be a reason, an outcome, a positive outcome of staying connected to somebody. And an argument for staying with somebody who doesn't produce that outcome isn't, well, I've always been with them, so I might as well continue to be so. Doesn't make any sense. And finally, number five, those that are resistant to growth and change. If you're surrounded by people who want absolutely nothing to do with changing anything in their life, these are people who think they actually have control over their reality as they see it. You know, the last couple of years, if it's shown us nothing, it's shown us that we could lose everything in a heartbeat for reasons that there were no way to predict, right? Well, what they call the black swan events. It's like, who predicted what happened these last few years? Yet there it was. So if I asked you 5 years ago, what was the chance of, there being a worldwide pandemic, et cetera, in hindsight, there would have been 100% because it happened. And there are things that are going to happen in the future that you can't even conceive of at this point, right? So you got to be ready to change, grow, evolve, adapt, pivot. All these things are imperative when it comes to being successful as an individual. All right. So what's up, Johnny Groob? All right. Aaron says, then they get mad at you because you're not letting them get away with their BS anymore. And then it's kind of just like, actually think about your behavior and get back to me if you ever grow up and accept reality. Absolutely right. And I am a big advocate for setting the criteria of the alliances that you build with people. If you don't set the criteria of what your standards are, then there is absolutely no expectation that the people you are connected to are going to respect anything where standards would be with you. If somebody gets into your car smoking a cigarette and you're like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, you can't get in here and smoke. Well, you probably should have told them when you saw that outside, but there are some people who don't want anybody smoking their car that will let somebody get into the car smoking, get out. Then they'll spend all day the next day trying to clean their car because they just don't have the balls to say something. You wind up more miserable. And by the way, if the person who was smoking a cigarette getting in your car thought it was okay, then they think that they're being a positive friend. They think that they're being productive. The communication needs to remedy that. All right. So sometimes you just got to be strong enough to stand up for who you are. Felix, what's up, brother man? My man, City Island. Good to see you. All right. So stay-at-home mom and wifing entrepreneurial. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because you know what? And I'll, this is my traditional values showing right now. I couldn't do what I do if it wasn't for my wife. I could be one of these losers that just leaves his wife and just does everything on his own, but my wife and I have a functional relationship. We have a productive relationship. We have 4 kids, so we also have a reproductive relationship, but there's something to be said for the unit of a family and what that unit is capable of, and I couldn't do the things that I do right now if it wasn't for the support of my wife. Impossible. And there are some people, listen, if you're in toxic relationships with your wife, if your wife represents somebody that's on this list to a level that is just unacceptable, then yeah, there's directions that you have to take with that, because I also don't believe in, the captain going down with the ship necessarily, and obviously kids complicates this thing, and there are a bunch of different directions you can go. But the joke I made, and I mean this, humorously, like, hey, even Tony Robbins got divorced, so there's something to be said for what the big picture is, but as far as you staying at home and being a good wife and a good mother to the kids, like, that is what it's about. And knowing your husband Jamie, like, he is able to do that because you are so supportive, and if that chemistry wasn't working, would have ended a long time ago, as with any successful relationship. Right. So it's definitely a team effort. Caceres writes it right on. That's my only Dr. Phil quote, right? We teach people how to treat us, right? The exact quote from Dr. Phil is, we train people how to treat us. But that's what it's about. If you don't set the criteria, then why should they follow anything other than their instincts? How many people are oblivious to, they just lack the ability to empathize with other people, to sort of read the room to some extent, and they just act how it was normal to them. And if it is unacceptable the way that they're acting, how are they supposed to know? We have to be able to communicate that. You have to be strong enough to stand up for who you are. All right. And sometimes that's just saying no. Whatever the context is, it's you are offered an outcome, a scenario, some sort of exchange, and you say no. And it takes a minimal functional level of personal strength and self-reliance, I would say, to be able to say no in those situations. But we absolutely train people how to treat us. Two on Tom. What's up, brother man? Good to see you. Right on. Aaron says, excellent. If all goes planned next year, I shall be a teacher also. Right on. That's good for you. There are so many people that years ago, I was talking about homeschooling. And, obviously I'm not saying Aaron or anybody watching is included in this, but I certainly got a lot of feedback back then that I was fucking crazy. It's like, what do you mean? They got to go to school. They got to, like, how are they, or how are they going to get into college? Or it's almost like cliche now, all the questions that, that people normally ask. But back then there wasn't as much of a conversation about it, on the scale that it exists today, especially after the last few years, when so many people were forced to build some sort of homeschool relationship, and a lot of them decided to continue doing that. The thing is, I knew this from the beginning. My decision to homeschool was made on a graduation day, or at least said out loud for the first time when I graduated high school. I remember sitting in graduation with my mother right next to me and telling her, I'm never putting my kids through this shit. I was on graduation day. And by the way, I got a bunch of awards at graduation and stuff. Like I had a pretty good senior year. The whole 4 years is a different story, but senior year, I was pretty spot on. And I just knew that it was a box that I spent all those years trying to fit in. And if I, speculating as I only can, if I was in a different situation, I certainly would have had a different experience. Now, it's not that I don't have gratitude for the experience I have, because it makes me the man I am. But moving forward, it's like, yeah, I think there's a better way to do this. I've been talking about this forever. And now so many people that are in my tribe, that are connected to me, I have decided to do it too, with great effect, and it's one of those things that I believed in at the core of my belief in how to be a strong family, right? Right on. All right. Judge Cohen, what's going on, brother man? Good to see you. All right. I think I'm going to call it there. I went over my list. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I got to do better. Oh, well, we got some more comments here. Hold on. That's right. Two on top. Choosing a wife is the first step, right? So, man, I can't tell you, like, you guys know my story. I met my wife. We were married a month later. We'll be married 20 years in a few months. 4 beautiful kids. Still get a kick out of each other. All that stuff. She actually just went this morning to pick up her mother from the airport from Brazil, spending a few months with us, as she does. I had a criteria. I understood what I wanted in a family, what I wanted in a wife. Number one, she needed to be hot, right? So it's like I can't spend my life with an ugly chick. Sorry. I don't care how great her personality is. All right, I'm allowed to be a little fucking superficial, right? Anyway, I I had my criteria. I met my wife. We were married a month later. How does it work 20 years? Because it wasn't me losing my mind or her losing her mind and just impulsively saying, fuck it. Let's just do something that we never thought about, never prepared for, never developed a position on, a relationship with, but it feels good right now, so let's just do it. It's like some people have kids that way, right? But some other people get married that way. And for me, it's like, no, like it had to fit. It had to fit the model. It had to fit my plan for the future, right? It had to sort of follow what I knew I wanted the outcome of my family to be. You know, my wife was from a big family. She, was very family oriented. She was educated. She was open minded. She was, she was open to homeschooling for one, because that's not, my wife's from Brazil. Like that's not a thing in Brazil. I think it's illegal in Brazil to homeschool your kids. But the thing is, whatever the criteria was, she met it, and here we are 20 years later, right? So there's something to be said for following what you want your outcome to be at the beginning of the planning stages, right? And as Tuan Tom said, choosing a wife is the first step, 100%. All right, guys, let's stop it there. I'm going to go upstairs and say hello to my mother-in-law. I hear they just got home from the airport, but I appreciate you guys. Do me a favor, check out the links down below if you haven't already. Like and subscribe whatever platform you're watching on. There is a significant number of people that watch my videos and aren't subscribed or following me on the platform. They're doing it. But I appreciate your time. I don't take it for granted. I have a good time while doing it. I think you could see that in the energy that I have during these. This is one of my favorite things to do during the week. But check out the links. I'll be here next week. And as always, brothers and sisters, pressure to motherfucking power.